Welcome back, State of Fluxers. It's me, Matt, with a review of the film Tusk. This is the 11th film by Kevin Smith, and this one started with an interesting fan movement. The fan movement of Walrus. Yes. This movie came about due to sort of like an online prank that had happened. This man had put up an advertisement that was about a person looking for a roommate. They would get free room and board if they were willing to dress up like Walrus for 1 hour each day. This person had made up this story, how they were friends with the Walrus, presented it all as reality, and it kind of took the internet by storm. And Kevin Smith, on his Smodcast with Scott Mosier, kind of used it as an exercise on how to make a movie, how the genesis of an idea can springboard into something quite larger and more grand. And I encourage you to listen to it. It's fascinating. The couple episodes that they were, The Walrus and the Carpenter, is really the one that kind of did it. But what happened during that podcast was Kevin Smith was reignited with something he had lost years prior, after his trauma with making Cop Out, and his kind of career blunders, or as his at least own perceived career blunders from the previous couple movies before that, led him to retire with Red State. And the retirement was very loose. If you watch any promotional material for Red State, you can see him during the behind the scenes saying, like, crew, you're invited back to the next one of these that we do. So when he said he retired, I think everybody kind of knew that he wasn't probably done filmmaking. It was just a matter of time before he found something to say. And find something to say he did, in a really weird and unusual way. His previous movie had been the most un-Kevin Smith movie that he had made. He made essentially a drive-in feature where it was without a genre. It was a film looking for a genre that kind of, I guess, is mostly horror, but also an action thriller, and also part of a dark comedy. And so he kind of fused those things into this movie as well. And he adapted that loose plot into something quite horrific. What if that man that was just looking for companionship, by putting a person living in his house inside of a walrus outfit, actually wanted to sew that person into the outfit and make them a real human walrus? It sounds absurd, and it is, but this is one of the weirdest examples of a, like, mad scientist Frankenstein-y film, Reanimator-esque Human Centipede. I hate to recommend that movie. I absolutely do not recommend the Human Centipede. But this is kind of like if Human Centipede had been done with any kind of flair for fun. And it works. The body horror elements of this are really quite strong. Now, I recognize this movie is pretty off-putting, but I also argue that this movie is one of the most fiercely original movies that you will ever watch, and is quite compelling because of it. Again, kind of like Red State, it shifts genres on a dime. The first part of the movie feels incredibly Kevin Smithy, so much so that there's like so many Easter eggs to people who listen to any number of Kevin Smith's podcasts, from the phone ringing, from the Hollywood Babylon segments in his ringtone, the main character's ringtone, to Canada, the place where it's red, white, but never blue, eh? And all sorts of things like that. There's any number of things. The movie stars Justin Long, who is a podcaster, and he does a kind of riff on the Star Wars kid. This film's version of it is the Kill Bill kid, where this kid accidentally cuts his leg off, swinging it around like the bride from Kill Bill. And plays out like a comedy. Weirdly enough, for a Kevin Smith movie, the comedy doesn't land too hard. It's like it's too forced and he's trying too hard. But I'll touch on that shortly. The movie continues moving forward. He goes on a podcast journey to record a podcast with the Kill Bill Kid, only to discover Kill Bill Kid had killed himself. And so now this man is looking for a podcast, just anybody interesting, but who could possibly be interesting in the Great White North? And that's when he sees an advertisement in a bathroom wall for a man looking for companionship, and has this weird story about a walrus. So he ends up calling that guy, going to his house, and meets Michael Parks. And Michael Parks gives an incredibly captivating performance. He is stunning. Every bit as good as he was in Red State. I think this movie he trumps it. And I can't believe that he did that. This performance should have gotten him an Oscar nomination. I know why it didn't, because it's a movie about a man sewing another man into a walrus suit, but nonetheless, that performance is jaw-dropping. Anyway, Justin Long, Michael Parks engage each other, and the movie becomes a very quiet drama as you're being pulled into this story. And Michael Parks talks very quietly and intimately with you, just pulling you in and pulling you in. It lassos you, and then it just slowly tugs the rope closer and closer until you're in his spider's web. And he ends up drugging Justin Long. And then the rest of the movie plays out. There's an interesting side story where you're following Justin Long and his girlfriend, played by Genesis Rodriguez, who's really, really good. She has a great monologue moment where she just stares dead into the camera and delivers this really powerful monologue. She's a really strong actress, and I would like to see her go a lot of places. She genuinely has quite a bit of talent. And his co-podcasting buddy, played by Haley Joel Osment, they discover something is wrong because he stops answering his phone, and then they get a strange call from him, from the mad scientist's house. And I say mad scientist loosely. It's just the trope of the mad scientist. He's not really a scientist, as you will see if you ever watch this film. But yeah, they get a call, and then they go to Canada to try and track where he went, because he went off book. And the movie is very creepy, and it does the body horror elements in ways that are stunning in their reveal, because he doesn't hit you on the head with it. He gives you the information very slowly, and he does this deliberately throughout the film. Like when Michael Parks gives his monologue and his character speech, and you're just kind of being slowly lassoed in, when something starts going wrong, the information is also given to you slowly. It's a slow, long burn before you discover what has happened to Justin Long as he sits in the wheelchair. Other body horror films kind of just hit you with it right away. And he does this repeatedly. He does this technique of a slow reveal to something truly terrifying. Slow reveal to something truly terrifying. Until the moment where he just hits you like a baseball bat to the neck, with the most ultimate experience of body horror in the film. The reveal of Tusk. And that part is just grotesque and perfect. This film is not perfect, however. I've been singing its praises, of which there are many. There are a couple that really, really don't work for me. Really only two. One of them is Justin Long is incredible in this movie. This is one of his strongest performances, and you can tell he had a lot of fun doing it because he throws himself in 100%. I say fun loosely because it's not fun to be in the positions he's in and stuff and have to give that much energy and whatnot to the terror behind his performance. But He gives it to it. This is his best example of the range of acting that he can do. He's funny. He is dramatic. He can be scared. He can be actiony. He can be fierce. He can do it all. He is a really good actor. However, his character is just incredibly unlikable, and I think he did this, Smith did this so that when that character reaches his fate, the audience isn't completely repulsed, because he kind of somewhat deserves it, because he is kind of like a hardcore asshole. But from a screenplay point of view, a lot of what we are presented with in this film is essentially aspects of Kevin Smith's life at that point. He had no longer been a filmmaker for quite a few years. He'd been a podcaster, and he was comfortable in doing that. But he sort of stops the movie to say that the persona presented in those podcasts, the filthy language, the keeping it real and raunchy, because that's what the audience wants, but not being the true self, I think is quite reflective of what he is trying to communicate to the audience, that he is not necessarily the Kevin Smith that we have come to see on all these podcasts. And I think the Kevin Smith that we're seeing now in these past few years post-heart attack is a much more genuine version of Kevin Smith, the actual person, than the Kevin Smith that he presented in Hollywood Babylon and presented on Smodcast, where he's being incredibly crass, as he'd always been with his movies, but he just doesn't let up, and it gets to a point where it's just not funny anymore. And giving us this character that is kind of an obvious reflection of him, and painting him so unpleasantly, I think it was an interesting choice. I get it, but it makes for a really hard watch for that first act, when you're supposed to latch on to him, because he's really the only character you're given to latch on to. But he's just so unlikable, and then once the terror starts happening to him, you genuinely want to latch onto him, because nobody should be going through what he's going through, but you also can't get out of your head, like, what an asshole he was being when he was, like, getting head from his girlfriend, and, like, the podcasts that he was performing, or his reaction to Kill Bill Kid. So that's one problem. The other problem is Guy Lapointe. Guy Lapointe is a character that was, I think, written for Quentin Tarantino, but Tarantino turned him down because he had said that he was just kind of disinterested in acting moving forward, which is unfortunate. I kind of would have liked to have seen Tarantino's portrayal. I think Tarantino's portrayal of that character might have worked a lot better than the actor that they ultimately got to play Guy Lapointe. Guy Lapointe is a incredibly A-list actor that was snuck into this movie. Nobody knew he was going to be in it. It was a really well-kept secret, because I saw this opening night, and I had no idea that he was in it. So that was quite stunning. And if you don't want to hear who it is, just skip ahead, or stop watching now. But Guy Lapointe is played by Johnny Depp under a whole lot of makeup. And he's really good, but his scenes are so out of left field and do not match the tone of the entirety of the rest of the film, that every time he's on screen it comes to a dead fucking stop. And it's really unfortunate, because the movie is packing so much momentum to the points where you're getting there. Even though it's a slow burn torture porn kind of movie, it is so carefully constructed and so well executed and smartly executed and keeps you constantly guessing that you don't need this farcical character bumbling around. It completely stops any momentum to a halt. Now, I will come around on this character upon the next film, which is completely weird because of how much I loathed his presence in this film. But Johnny Depp he gives a grade A performance as this character who's so out of place that it just kills this movie, and it's a goddamn shame, because without him, you have a much better movie. And I think Tarantino's portrayal of the character would have been a little more gritty. You would have gotten a little bit more this kind of thing, or maybe doing a little bit of a French this kind of a thing, and that would have worked better for the character. He would have been a little more eccentric, and not so much a goofball as Johnny Depp plays, and that's the issue. And yeah, I guess that's all I'm going to say about that. I have much more to say about Guy Lapointe, but I'll talk about Guy Lapointe in the next film. His character carries over, as do the two yoga hosers themselves. In this movie, there's a couple little stops at a Canadian quick stop, if you will, and you meet two young girl clerks behind the counter, and they are fine in this movie. They're very dismissive of them, and neither Harley Quinn Smith or Lily Rose Depp have much screen presence in that film. That will change upon the next couple of movies when I touch on them later. But they don't really sell it too well in Tusk. What works best with Tusk is the hardcore performance from Michael Parks, the hardcore performance from Justin Long, the hardcore performances from Genesis Rodriguez and Haley Joel Osment, who is so good in this movie. You kind of forget how good of an actor he is because you just think of him as the Sixth Sense kid. That dude had a whole career trajectory that like spiraled out of control, and I have no idea why. He was in pretty much good movies most of his childhood, and then he just fell out of the limelight, and I don't get it. He's talented. And it's sad that something like Tusk is one of his strongest efforts of the past 10 years. But yeah, Tusk is a good movie. It is a very, very strong 3-star movie. I encourage any and everybody to watch this movie just to give it a chance, just to say you've seen the Walrus movie, just to say that you have experienced the perfect grindhouse movie. Like back when Weinstein Company was releasing all these, when they released Grindhouse and then released a bunch of movies under the Grindhouse label, this movie is so perfect to fit in with them because this one feels like a real authentic one, much more so than Hobo with a Gun, Hobo with a Shotgun I think it was called, and even in a lot of ways more so than Machete. Or Planet Terror. This feels more grindhousey because this feels like it's a movie made right out of the 80s. And if you go back to the commentary from Donnie Darko, of all things, Kevin Smith did a special guest commentary on the special edition director's cut version of Donnie Darko. And he tells the story of how he and his buddy Brian Johnson, before they made, or right after they had made the movie Vulgar, which is a movie I might explore on here one day. I have thoughts on that. When they made the movie Vulgar, they were looking for a follow-up movie, and they both shared an affinity for these sort of sleazy 80s grindhouse monster movies, and they tried to get the rights to Chud. And Chud is a mystery. Nobody knows who owns Chud, or they didn't back circa 2000. But he tells the story of how he really wants to make like just a great balls to the wall, in your face, guttural scream of a monster movie. And he got to make it, man. And he did a hell of a good job. I think this is Kevin Smith's best looking movie. It is so good looking. So much so that I forgot about how good looking it is. The scenes where it's Michael Parks just talking for like 10 minutes straight, uninterrupted, to Justin Long are photographed so elegantly. Everything around him, the visual language of the movie is never once disturbed or boring. It is so captivating to watch. The reveal of the walrus is just jaw-dropping. And like the whole movie just looks good. Like I think Smith took great steps to sort of combat the thoughts that his movies looked bad, that he was a bad filmmaker on that respect, because certainly with these movies he really isn't. With Red State, with Tusk, he shows dramatic improvement. With Zack and Miri and Jersey Girl before that, he makes good-looking movies. That criticism is a false criticism, one that he keeps repeating himself, and I wish he would just stop, because it's not true. Alright, as I say, this is a really strong 3-star movie. I'm going to leave you with one last story. This is a movie that I saw opening day. I saw the very first show of the morning, the day that this movie came out. And my wife and I decided to go to the movies. She had no interest in seeing Tusk. She, by and large, isn't a huge Kevin Smith fan. I think she liked Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. She doesn't admit it, but she likes Jersey Girl. She really liked Zack and Miri Make a Porno, but that's by and large it. So we went to the theater and went our separate ways. My wife's movie started a little bit earlier, so she went off to her movie. I waited around, looked at all the posters, went into the movie, sat down, and I had Tusk wash over me. Cut back months prior. I was in Chile on my honeymoon when Walrus Yes dropped. And I remember sitting in over like Christmas listening to the podcast from Chile and getting caught up in this whole movement of Walrus Yes. Should this movie be made? Give me a Walrus Yes if I should make it, or a Walrus No if I shouldn't. I hit with a Walrus Yes. Yeah, this movie should have been made. And then when he announced that he was moving forward and he was really making this movie, I chose to back away. Kevin Smith has this thing where he tends to overshare. He spoils the whole experience of a movie before you can experience the movie, and I think that's kind of a poor way of doing it. I understand kind of why he does that, because he has such an intimate relationship with his fans, but I like to be surprised by movies, and so like I started this whole silly retrospective on Kevin Smith's career because of Clerks 3's production. Since then, I'm not reading anything. I have zero interest in learning anything about Clerks 3 until I walk into that movie theater and see the movie for the first time. With Tusk, I did the same thing. I knew nothing about this movie short of listening to the Walrus and the Carpenter podcast and following a little bit of the movement of Walrus Yes until it went into production. Then I dipped out. I didn't even watch a trailer for this silly movie. So when this movie started happening to me, I had no idea what to expect. And it was such a thrilling experience. But it was also one where the whole time I was just sat looking at the screen like, my God, is this happening? Where is this going? Like, he's not actually going to do what he said in the podcast. Like, that would be insane. And so it continues to happen. It continues to happen. My wife's movie had started earlier, and so it let out about a half an hour before my movie ended. And she texts me and says, "Which auditorium are you in? I'll just watch the last half hour of your movie." So she goes to sneak into mine. And traditionally I don't text on my phone, so don't at me. But yeah, put your phones away, folks. So she walks into the theater at the exact moment of the reveal of the walrus and the arr, arr, arr scene, as it's just like screaming and stuff. And I just see my wife come in, look at the screen, turn, and walk out. And then about 10 seconds later, I get a text like, "What the fuck are you watching? What is wrong with you?" And she just starts hitting me with all these things about how I'm disturbed. Sadly, I think I was one of 2 people in that entire auditorium that day. So I felt a little more comfortable being on my phone. Again, off your phone, people, especially now. Since then, I've worked in a movie theater, in the movie industry and stuff, and drives me nuts. People with phones, put them away. I don't even take mine in anymore. Anyway, that's my funny story from opening night of Tusk. My wife has refused to ever watch this movie since that day because of what happened to her that day, just getting hit with that image. Um, and yeah, but this is one of my favorite movies to just whip out and show people because I love to see their reaction. Because a lot of them see the artistry to this stupid movie, but then a lot of them are like have the same reaction to my wife, like you're depraved. And I think I am a mix of both. This is a 3-star movie, almost 3.5. Take out Guy Lapointe. I think this movie and make Justin. Justin Long a little bit more likable. Movie would be easily a 3.5 or 4-star movie. But I really like the creativity this movie has. There's a lot of good selling points to it, far more than the negatives. Up next week we are going to do Yoga Hosers, and that's an interesting one. So we'll explore that then. Last point I guess I'll make is this movie is the first of a trilogy, an incomplete trilogy at this point. It starts with Tusk, dives into Yoga Hosers, and it's supposed to end with Moose Jaws. Moose Jaws is a remake of Jaws, but instead of a shark, it's a moose, the most deadly animal on land. And I'm so interested in seeing that, and I hope to God that movie actually gets made. That is the movie that when he announced it, I was more excited than any other project he had announced in the past 20 years, honestly. That just, something about that captivates my imagination. But anyway, this is the first of the True North trilogy, and it gets a very strong recommendation. Up next is the second of the True North trilogy, Yoga Hosers. Hit the bell, do all that good stuff. Thank you for watching. Yeah, peace.